Hello, and welcome to the Hamumu Halloween Home Horror Hoedown.
The podcast where we watch 31 horror movies throughout the hallowed month of October.
Ranging from the critically acclaimed to film school projects gone gruesomely awry.
And we take them all way too seriously.
I'm your host, Mike Hummel.
And I'm your host, Sully Hummel.
Now warning, we use a ghoulish number of spoilers, so watch the movies first.
Second warning, we don't know anything about anything, so don't take us seriously while we take these movies seriously. We are back again to talk about lesbian horror.
And the great representation of having LGBTQ murderers.
Right? I actually feel better about this one because, you know,
that is funny.
There were two lesbians and one of them was a crazy psycho killer and the other one was not.
Sure, that's very good because what I was going to say is I guess I was wrong in saying it's a nice representation because apparently they're just all murderers now. No, but you're right, 50-50 in this movie.
Because in the last one, the lesbian was crazy in so many ways. Like, she was a murderer and she was, like, pursuing violently someone who was not interested in her in that way.
True.
Like, it was just bad representation. This one, though, we've got a lesbian couple hanging out in the woods for their anniversary weekend, their first anniversary, and nothing says first anniversary like shoving your wife off a cliff.
I would agree.
I'm really glad that we're, like, much closer to our 20th anniversary than our first.
Well, if you thought the first was fun, wait till you see the 20th.
We're talking about the movie What Keeps You Alive from 2018.
It's fun that our murderer in this movie never wastes time with being creepy. Like, this loving couple shows up at the cabin, and from the first moment, she's just super creepy the whole time.
Yeah, like, one of my big notes is, how did this relationship last for a whole year? Plus, because I assume they dated for a while before they got married. Like,
sure.
How? Because Jackie, whose cabin we're at, this cabin has been in her family for generations, like, she's nuts. And there's no secret to it. Like,
yeah.
How did Jules not pick up on this?
She's like, let me sing you my fun little love song about being a demon and killing people.
And bloodletting and yeah. And it wasn't even just singing it. Okay, so it's a folk song, it's a creepy song, whatever. You could sing it in a way that doesn't look like you are currently possessed by a demon.
That's true.
Like, I don't know, like, maybe because she was at the cabin and she was like, I'm just gonna let it all hang out. You're going over the cliff tomorrow anyway.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
But then why was she so upset that Sarah showed up and gave her secret away?
Yeah, well, because she wasn't counting on it to put her off her game.
I guess.
Ruins everything.
I mean, so the first thing you need to know, dear listener, is that Jackie is in fact Megan, something that Julie, her wife, finds out when Sarah shows up unexpectedly because, you know, oh my gosh, there's lights on at the cabin, we better go check it out.
Yeah.
Which makes me think of the previous podcast where we were talking about how they should have kept the science experiment girl in the house rather than in the barn because someone would come and check on the lights.
Yeah, see?
Hello?
Boom. They check on the lights. Of course, this was the house, but yeah.
But still, like, they would have come and they would have been like, oh yeah, we're here. If you show up and there's only lights on in the barn, that's weird.
That is pretty weird.
Okay.
This makes it seem like you're harboring an alien.
Right? So anyway, like, that's where everything starts to unravel for Julie, is she's like, wait a minute, why does this person know you as Megan instead of Jackie? But like you pointed out when it happened...
Thanks, I'm smart.
She goes from 0 to 60 in suspicion meters, like, immediately.
Yeah, which seemed really excessive for just, I didn't know that in your childhood you were called Megan.
Right. Like, there were possible answers other than you're a serial killer that she might have jumped to sooner. So the thing that you pointed out was that makes it seem like she had suspicions before this.
Yeah, there was something up there.
But we don't know what those are. We didn't see anything about that.
No. But Megan Jackie was not put too far off her game because she was kind of in control for the most of the movie. And she just was like hunting.
Yes. That was another thing I wrote down, is that Julie shoots. Like, she's talking about how, she shot, competitively or whatever, and she was giving Jackie a hard time about her form and whatnot. But Jackie hunts.
Yeah.
And so she starts giving all these stories about when she was a kid and her dad teaching her how to hunt. And it's clear that her psychopath behavior goes back a long way, because she has this story about watching a bear die. The very first time she ever held a gun.
Yeah.
She shoots a whole black bear.
Her being creepy right out of the gate.
Yeah. But then she says later that her parents had a good relationship. Her dad never did anything weird to her. Like, Julie's trying to find out why this is happening. And Jackie slash Megan says it's nature, it's not nurture. Like, she's very clear. I was born this way. This is not how, something that happened to me because of the way I was raised, which I thought was a very interesting point.
Yeah, she's just saying that her parents were perfectly fine parents. So stop trying to blame this on drama.
Right. This is just who I am. Like, I don't know.
It's another LGBTQ question right there.
Right. A lot of horror movies are predicated on the idea that how you are nurtured turns you into a bad person.
Yeah.
Like, I would say 80+% of them have some explanation as to what made the bad guy, right?
Yeah.
And so it's always refreshing to me to come across one that doesn't do that. And this goes even further by just flat out saying, no, that's not it.
Nope.
Some people are just born murderers.
Delightful. Oh, I thought you were going to say bad, and I wanted to say from her perspective, it's not bad. It's great.
Right. So what was the body count in this movie?
Well, we've got Sarah and drunk Daniel.
Oh my gosh, Daniel and his wine, man. He was like such a white woman.
On his Instagram.
Yeah, he was drinking lots and lots of wine. Like, he couldn't open his eyes more than halfway at any point in the movie.
Yeah, and I think actually there's only one other body for real officially, which is not the one you expect it to be.
Yeah, because that inhale at the end of the movie suggests that Julie survived not one, but 2 falls off of the cliff.
Plus whatever happened in the attic that we didn't see, which was quite violent.
Yes. Okay, so I thought that was a very distinct choice for the filmmakers to make. That this, like, almost culminating battle, the penultimate battle of the movie, happens in the attic, and instead of us up there being the camera watching the battle, we are in the floor below the attic, looking up at the ceiling, listening to it, and just seeing evidence of, like, light swaying and stuff.
Yeah.
Which then kind of
Godzilla.
Right? But it kind of puts us in the story more, because you would think that being able to see it would mean you were more part of the story. But that, in fact, is I am watching a story.
Yeah.
Because being in the floor below and, like, wondering what's going on is what would happen if you were actually there. So
no, I'd be on my way out the door, actually.
Right? So I just thought that was a creative choice for them to make. And I think, I'm sure there was a very distinctive thought process behind it.
So this brings me to a frustration I kept feeling, which is that Julie made a lot of really bad choices.
So many bad choices. The biggest of which being she's done. She's gone.
Good. Movie's over.
She knocks Jackie out with a tranquilizer dart that appeared from nowhere.
Another problem I had.
Gets in the Jeep, and she's on her way to town, and then she realizes that it's like she remembers a conversation that they had where she's talking about being a crow and crows being the smartest bird in the world. And Jackie slash Megan is like, well, I'm a bald eagle. Are you scared? Mm-hmm. And, like, just the memory of her doing this was enough to make her turn around and go back and, like, need to finish the fight.
Well, my theory on that was the idea, and this makes me mad because I disagree, that she thought, if I just run away, I'm leaving her to kill other people. I'm not stopping her. I'm not solving the problem, which is dead wrong. If she went into town and got the cops, this would all be solved. There were
Right.
bodies to be found. There were missing people.
Like,
everything.
look at all the bruises. I
Yeah.
got pushed off a cliff. I had to stitch my stomach open, but then she tore the stitches out.
Yep.
I know where there's 2 hacked up bodies that have been thrown in the river. And I don't care how carefully Jackie thinks she cleaned that house.
She didn't do a good
There's
job.
no way. Like, that whole scene with her cleaning with the blacklight flashlight, I'm like, come on, that's not how blood works.
Yeah.
Or cleaning products.
They
or
have
wood.
more advanced ways of detecting things than that.
Yeah, so I agree with you. If she had just gone to town and told her story, it would have been resolved. There would have had to be a manhunt,
Yeah.
a woman hunt, but they would have eventually caught her.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think her going back and feeling like she had to single-handedly finish it off was a huge mistake.
Clearly, because it led to her semi-death.
Her second semi-death.
Yeah.
I mean, I will give you one. I fell off a cliff. You thought I was dead.
Oh, are you
I
rating it?
disappeared. No. I'm like, 1 is unbelievable. 2, I'm like,
It's unbelievable.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
That little girl, because she was tiny and
She was
skinny
tiny.
and fragile. Like, she didn't survive the first fall.
Is it all a dream?
And after being, like, she had a bruised spleen after the first fall, and a sprained ankle, and a hole in her gut, and who the heck knows what else. The second time she fell, her sprained spleen is broken.
Oh, this is making my legs hurt.
Like, it just,
Yeah.
it was movie magic. That was
Well,
just a
sure.
little too far.
Yeah, I think it was okay for her to die the second time. They
Yes.
didn't need to do that.
They didn't. They absolutely didn't, because she died we still know that she was the hero because she swaps out Jackie's insulin for hydrogen peroxide. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because she has some medical training, and leaves her a snarky video message about what happens when you inject hydrogen peroxide into your bloodstream. Like, she's all like, well, I'm dead, but guess what? Like,
Which is not as good as being alive, though.
no, it's not. But I think it was, a last-ditch effort. Like, if you still manage to kill me, I'm still going to save all of those other people, which
Yeah.
is very noble. And
It is indeed.
whatever. And I think she could have died having gone over that cliff a second time, and it would have been a more noble ending.
Yeah. And her other medical thing was jabbing her with a tranquilizer dart, which we never saw her pick up that dart.
We never saw any darts in the whole
never
movie.
any evidence that there was any reason why there'd be a tranquilizer dart somewhere. It was weird.
The thing is, it makes sense that there's a tranquilizer dart in that house because they did all that hunting. They had like dead animals all
they
over the
had
walls
to shoot
and stuff.
things, not to put them to. They don't work at the zoo.
Okay, Jackie / Megan is crazy enough that she would tranquilize animals and then kill them. Like, I
Whoa.
feel like that's a thing she would do.
Okay, but that calls for a scene where she goes, "Holy crap! Here's a room full of tranquilizer darts."
Exactly. Like, it would have been so easy. And they showed that they know how to do that kind of setup. There was this offhand mention of her needing, oh, do you know where my insulin is? Like, way at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then that never comes up again, which I kind of have issue with because
Me
there was a
too.
lot going on in this movie. And I feel like Jackie would have had to, like, dose up a couple times.
She did at one point. She dosed up at some point.
Oh, okay.
In the middle.
Okay. Like, just, I feel like her being so active. I mean, she was, like, running around in the woods, doing all kinds of
Yeah.
murdery things. Her adrenaline was going.
And it was over a couple days.
Yeah, I feel like there should have been more, like, it should have been a more everyday part of her life. But I get why they didn't, because they wanted us to forget about it.
I didn't ever forget about it.
That's the problem. There's not enough diabetic representation in movies. So
Yeah.
when insulin is mentioned, you immediately are like, oh, well, that's coming back.
Well, the movie's called What Keeps You Alive, and it is kind of clever and fun to have, oh, hey, that's the thing. That's what keeps her alive, and she's going to take it away from her. Except that it happened so late, and it was set up so early, it was just like, come on.
Yeah.
When's this? When did she
Right?
take it out? Because I kept thinking, like, when they were in the rowboats together and she's almost got her, that there was going to be like she was going to drop it overboard right then or something.
Anything. Also, it's totally a cheat because it wasn't taking away what kept her alive that killed her.
It was
was
murdering
tricking
her.
her into injecting hydrogen peroxide into her blood.
Yes.
Like, it wasn't a matter of taking it away. So,
which I would have really liked.
Yes, I would have, even if it had just been like those vials had all been smashed and she's needing it and she goes and she's like, oh crap. And then she, expires in the house because her body refuses to keep her alive at that point.
It's like, I could just see that. It's like when she thinks she's won and she's got Julie pinned down with a knife or a gun or whatever, and you're about to die now, walk off that cliff. Oh crap, I collapse. I can't continue.
Or even that happens much earlier. She knows she doesn't have insulin, and she knows that's like a ticking clock for her, right? And so she's trying to get Julie over the cliff the second time before that ticking clock goes off. And, we could have had that same scene where she fell down because of the tranquilizer dart, only it could have been because she needed her insulin.
Which is what that scene felt like. Almost like they made that scene of them on the cliff and her falling down, and then they went back and filmed the scene in the car where she actually stabs her with the dart, because it seemed so much
we need
like
to add
the
more.
insulin thing, but for some reason it was a different method.
Right. What I wanted it to be was that whatever was in that dart was going to, like, speed up her metabolism and make her need the insulin sooner. But like you pointed out, people don't dart animals to make them faster.
Which, I mean, maybe in like horse racing they do. Like they're in the stands and they're all, come on, tree of 1,000 faces.
What kind of horse racing are you going to?
Horse racing horses have weird names that are like sentences. I don't know. Tree of 1,000 Faces might be Cthulhu horse racing, but still, it was the first thing I came up with. I don't know. Johnny's Bag of Soap. That's a horse name. Fiddlesticks. No? You can't keep laughing.
Johnny's Bag of Soap.
I'm sorry. I thought that was a valid horse name, but I guess not.
Tree of 1,000 Faces. Johnny's Bag of Soap.
And Fiddlesticks.
Those are the first two horse names you came up with.
Yeah. Is that bad? I don't know horses very well.
Oh, I can't breathe. My stomach hurts. Those are the best names in the world.
3 hours later.
Okay.
I can't think of horse names on the fly.
I'm not trying to make fun of them. I love them. They're my favorite. I want you to name all the horses in horse racing.
I would be happy to.
Oh, all I can think of is the scene in Needful Things where the one guy who gets the horse racing game, and like it gives him all the answers.
See, that's
and
the
all
names.
I can think of is him tapping on each of the little metal horses and naming them.
Tree of 1,000 Faces.
Oh, Johnny's Bag of Soap. That's bad on so many levels.
Is it? That's bad.
It's like Johnny's bottle of glue.
Well, that's just rude. You don't call a horse that.
Okay.
Well, I wanted to ask you, when this bear story happened in the movie, we were talking about, oh, this is an important sentence that's coming back. It was after she shot a bear and then had to watch it die because she didn't have a way to kill it because her gun jammed. Her dad gave her a knife. And, the thing was, he gave me a knife so that if my gun jammed, I'd still be able to finish the job.
Right. In case my gun ever jams again, was what she said.
How did that not enter into the story at any point?
Right?
That's
so
really weird.
So frustrating. And then the necklaces, too. Like, okay, she gives Julie a necklace. And I'm like, oh, at first it's like, oh, it's an anniversary gift. How sweet. And then you're like, oh, this chick's a little crazy. She doesn't give sweet gifts, so something's definitely up. And then you find out about Jenny, who drowned on her way across the lake because she was, competing with Jackie when they were kids.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I bet Jenny had one of those necklaces. Like, I was
Probably.
making a connection there. And then when Julie comes back, she, like, looks behind the bear, which I thought was interesting. I liked that it was behind the bear. Mm-hmm. But she looks behind the bear and finds a whole, like, Sucret's tin of these necklaces. Like 6 of them.
Yeah.
So we knew about Jenny. We knew about the first wife who also drowned on their honeymoon, on a vacation of some kind.
Yeah, I don't remember the details, but she disappeared.
So clearly she had a necklace, but that means there's like 4 or 5 other people.
Oh, there definitely are. You knew there had to be.
But
I wanted her to be like,
how?
like 3 scenes later after the story about her first wife, she'd be like, "Oh yeah, did I ever mention my second wife to you?"
Right?
Or you remind me of my 4th wife.
And it just, like, again, it's that question of how did Julie never clue in that there was something wrong? Like,
Yeah.
Jackie was not, she was a good liar, but she wasn't that good of a liar.
No.
Like, nothing else ever came up. Nobody, she managed to eliminate from her life all of the people connected to all of these people who have died.
Yeah.
And also, around the 4th or 5th time some woman dies in your presence, I feel like the suspicion on from the cops is going to be, like, a little higher.
Well, it's, that's the whole serial killer thing. We know serial killers do this and get away with it for many kills, so she got away with it.
Isn't that, like, stranger kills? Or, it's
Probably.
not people who can be directly, like,
Well, and
her
maybe,
best friends and or closest women in her life are the ones who are dying.
but maybe the other ones were all strangers. It's just the Jenny and the one wife. And there was suspicion of her about Jenny, but they're like, probably not. She's just a kid.
But not the first wife? Like, I'm
don't
sorry.
know.
If there's a mildly suspicious drowning in your childhood, and then your first wife drowns when you're on vacation, I
But-
mean,
Records about your childhood are sealed, so nobody knows.
you seem awfully sure about that.
Definitely very sealed. Don't go looking.
Okay,
I
tree of
want
a thousand
I
faces.
want you to know about my horse racing past.
Right? I don't know, but I did feel like it was a good choice on Jackie's part to decide to push Julie over the cliff rather than drown her in the same lake she drowned Jenny in,
Yeah.
15 years before.
Yeah, that's good thinking. I would agree. There were 2 things that I thought were pretty unique in this movie because, otherwise we've seen lots of movies where the member of a marriage turns out to be a monster and is killing the other person and whatever.
Right.
Like that happens a lot. But in this one there were 2 things. One is that instead of going, "Oh no, this is a monster chasing after me now," and kind of dropping the whole relationship, Julie kept trying to make it work as much as she could. Was like hoping, "Oh, we're going to get you help. I'm not going to turn you in," and stuff like that. Like she had trouble convincing herself.
Do you think that's true, or that she was
do.
just saying those things because she thought she might live if she convinced Jackie of those
There's
things?
some of that, and that's part 2 of what I'm going to say. But earlier on, we had some moments like when Jackie was searching for her in the woods.
Oh, yeah.
She's like, "Call out to me, I'm going to find you." And she almost did. And she's like, maybe there's some explanation. Maybe this is
Right.
all okay. And
She was just trying to swat a
makes sense.
mosquito
Yeah.
and accidentally pushed me over the cliff.
Yeah. I mean, your head's a little messed up after you hit the ground, so who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's hard to wrap your head around the idea that someone you have been in love with and have
Yes.
trusted at that level for a whole year and more is trying to kill you.
Yeah,
Like-
and that's realistic, and I think a lot of other movies haven't done that. They've had the people just immediately flip to like, "Oh no, they're a monster now." And so I like that. And the other thing was this whole, once Jackie got her back under control, and had her kidnapped again, it wasn't go along with me and everything will be fine. It was, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to push you off this cliff. And that's what's happening. So make it work out well so that it doesn't get worse than that.
Right? And that part, like, I liked it, but also I'm like, I guess it just showed me how out of touch with reality Jackie truly was, that she's like trying to convince Julie to do a better job of cleaning up the evidence of her own death. Or, you know, like, oh, well, here, you have to eat this breakfast. I need your stomach full in case they do an autopsy.
That was
and
a
I'd
good
be
one.
like, well, I guess I'm not going to eat then. Like, if you're going to kill me one way or the other, I'm going to make as much evidence as possible that you're the one who did it.
Which is good. But it also leads to that whole thing of all the dumb choices she made, where there were so many times when she should have just ran for it. I mean, this is what I thought of during the movie.
Yeah.
I was like, this comes from you, Soli.
Okay.
There's 3 options. There's fight, flight, and freeze. And fight or flight would have been good. Freeze was the one she was doing, and I was done with it.
I mean, unfortunately, if we're putting it in those terms, which are, you have a very good point, but we put it in those terms, if freeze is her trauma response, that's not a thing she has a lot of control over.
Maybe that's the realism of it.
And I sort of think that's maybe the interesting thing about her leaving, because she finally got out of freeze and into flight, and then halfway through was like, screw this, I'm gonna fight.
Yeah.
And she went back. And that's maybe not the best choice, but it was also an example of her, like, taking control of the situation.
It makes you question whether crows are the smartest of birds or not.
Well, okay, so I liked the whole crow, eagle, like, we're birds metaphor, except that we live here on the river. Mm-hmm. In fact, we live on 2 different rivers. And in both places that we live, I have seen crows chase bald eagles down the river.
The eagles hate it.
They do, but they also leave. Because,
they can't do anything.
I mean, obviously, it's maybe more than one crow, but not necessarily all the time. I think that Jackie thought bald eagles were like big, aggressive birds, and they're big and they're predators, but I don't think they're necessarily aggressive the way she was thinking. Whereas the crows are smart and willing to fight to protect their territory. There was a flaw there, because I don't think that Jackie was a bald eagle. I think they could have found a better bird that would have been more, still a bird of prey, but one that was more vindictive. Eagles aren't vindictive.
But maybe that's the point. Maybe it was good because she thought she was being tough and scary by being the bald eagle, but the truth is the crow can totally chase a bald eagle.
Maybe that's it.
And that's her being such a smart bird.
Right? Yeah. I don't know. So I was kind of torn about the whole bird metaphor. So you mentioned how the title, What Keeps You Alive, ties to the insulin. It also ties to her father and her experiences hunting when she was young. Because after that kill, where she watched the bear die because her gun jammed, her father, like, they use the whole bear. And her father tells her, you only kill what keeps you alive. Mm-hmm. And I liked that. But then later, Julie is saying, like, oh, you know, I know what your father told you, but this isn't what he meant. And when she says this, it feels like she's saying, killing me.
Yeah, I think so.
But how, in any way, does that connect to what her father was saying?
Well, I don't think it does, but it does connect to what keeps you alive. Like, in another way of speaking, by killing her wife, she's killing what keeps her alive. Like, first of all, because her wife did her insulin for her, but she could do it herself. But anyway, you know, that whole thing of, you know, oh, you are everything to me, you keep me alive.
But she certainly wasn't thinking about the relationship in that way.
She definitely wasn't. But that's an interpretation of it.
The other possibility that I thought of, because I don't feel like that feels authentic to the story. Like, maybe that's how Julie was thinking about it. Like, I'm keeping you alive and you don't have to kill me. But, okay, Julie, that's crazy thinking. Maybe it was the idea that killing Julie, especially now that she's pushed her off the cliff and, like, all her secrets have come spilling out, killing Julie is necessary in order for her to stay free and alive. Like, Julie will get her locked up or, you know, killed or whatever, that she has to kill Julie to keep herself alive.
Which fits
Maybe.
more the idea of only kill things that keep you alive by getting killed.
Yeah. So I don't know. It just felt like either I missed something there and I didn't put the pieces together properly, or there were pieces missing. And I'm not sure which is true.
Don't know.
I'm sure if the writers were listening, they would be thinking, I missed something.
I'm sure they would.
Because it felt like a fairly tightly written story. It didn't have a lot of sloppiness to it.
Yeah.
Ratings. Overall, What Keeps You Alive is very well put together, I feel like. I enjoyed watching it in terms of like the visuals. I felt like there wasn't anything wild and crazy about the soundtrack. There was the one scene where she was blasting some kind of like punk rock song to antagonize Jackie into coming back to the house, but I didn't fully understand exactly what the benefit of that was, and I didn't understand why she would want to deafen herself in that way while Jackie could be sneaking up on her.
Yeah, she was like sitting there looking out for her, and she was making it so she couldn't hear her, which was dumb.
Also, she was standing in a lit room at a window, and Jackie had a high-powered rifle. Like, that was just dumb, too.
No, I don't think Jackie had a gun at that point.
Not anymore? Okay.
No, because that's after she had been left by the cliff. But I had the same concern, and then my idea was, if this makes sense, she put on the music because she assumed that Jackie would assume that she had gone off to get the cops like a normal person, and so Jackie was probably running away to try to not be found and just disappear. And she's like, guess what? I'm here at the house, you can tell because the music, so come on back. And that kind of makes some sense.
I mean, kind of, but also, I don't know. Anyway, I felt like the story was pretty strong. There weren't a lot of loose ends that left me annoyed, or, there were definitely some choices by the characters that I disagreed with, but I felt like they were kind of appropriate to the character, right? Mm-hmm. Like, they didn't feel random. They just felt like, ugh, this character is making me crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm down for some, like, just lesbians are normal people kind of stories. Mm-hmm. Like, that was not a part of the story. It just happened to be that's who they were, good. Which I really liked. But along with all those good things, it just, like, it definitely wasn't a mind-blowing story. There were a few flaws here and there. There were pieces that left me a little bit like, this could have been better.
Like the tranquilizer dart.
Right. So, I am going to give this movie 4 collapsing boathouses out of 5. It's a solid movie. It's a solid watch. I think a lot of people would enjoy this as a general horror movie.
Yeah. I feel like on paper, everything about this movie was just right. Mm-hmm. It should have been great. Mm-hmm. But it didn't pull me in that way. Like, I kept getting distracted because it just wasn't working quite right. And that's what brings it down to 4 collapsed boathouses out of 5. Same as you. That it's definitely good, but it was sort of awesome minus some problems. And that was problematic. I don't like that.
Yeah, I agree. There was just, it was very close to being a 5. Mm-hmm. It just was saggy in just enough parts to not make it. But really, overall, like, I don't regret watching this movie, and I would definitely recommend it to other people.
Sure, that's fair.
Cool. So, as we move on to the
Evil Twins,
Buried Alive from 2007.
But not the other Buried Alive from 2007. We watched the one with Tobin Bell.
Yes. I have to ask you the same question. Would you recommend other people watch Buried Alive?
Nope.
Well.
Next question.
Really? That means we're going to have an interesting discussion.
Are we? Did you love it?
I mean, love it is a stretch. But I didn't hate it the way I expected to hate it.
Buried Alive is one of those movies about a bunch of teens, college kids in this case, who go off on a trip into the desert in this case. I'm mad-libbing this from all the similar movies, to get murdered by a ghost.
Yes. And little bonus, they're going to the house that's been in their family for generations because there was gold in them thar hills.
Yeah, there was.
And they want to go find this gold.
And of course, they let the nerdy kid come along, even though he's nerdy. And they have a sorority thing happening where they're hazing some sorority girls. It's that kind of movie.
The characters in this movie are caricatures.
Yeah.
One of the sorority girls wears a cow costume for like the first half of the movie. The other one wears a dog costume because it's part of their hazing.
Yep.
Then they spend a significant portion of the rest of the movie wearing nothing at all.
Yes.
The nerdy guy that you mentioned is... You know how happy I was with the lesbian representation in What Keeps You Alive? I am equally unhappy with the representation presented by Phil. Because he is the college nerd, he is Asian, he has a stutter or compulsive verbal tic.
Yeah, he just repeats whole words.
And I think that like a lot of his other behaviors too, I think there was a suggestion of him being autistic in some way.
I think that's absolutely what they were going for, without any sensitivity or
and it was
anything.
So offensive.
Yeah.
So offensive. That being said, the storyline of Phil, if we could do away with all that gross garbage around just bad representation of autism and just have him be like the kind of nerdier friend, like they could have done that in a way where he could have still been the nerd who almost helped the other guy get through the hardest class in college and whatever.
But they're not the kind of people who would make that choice.
The people who made this movie?
Yeah.
I feel like you're right there. But he could have been. And if he had been not such a horribly offensive character, the whole thing of him being in the car for like half the movie was hilarious.
Yeah, we can't talk about it, but it's pretty funny.
It was the funniest thing. And there were other aspects of this movie that to me were so funny. Except that they were buried under just like sorority nonsense, frat boy nonsense, like incredibly insensitive grossness.
Yeah, they also had like the gross old man concept where, you know, he was being terrible and
he didn't bother me.
No.
Except for the part like his, in terms of him being bad representation, I'm like, yeah, okay.
No, he's reasonable representation.
It's good. It's funny.
It's just an opportunity, though, to be a pervert and gross in all the ways that you could be gross.
See, again, his character could have been even better had he not had the lecherous aspect. If he had just been out there and he was just a loner who lived in the desert all by himself, he was annoyed by these college kids, especially this college boy who's coming in and is like, this is my house and you're not going to be here for very much longer and blah blah blah, and he had just been torturing them with like masks and noises and just generally being a jerk to them, that would have been amazing. He didn't have to be creepy.
Oh, speaking of creepy, this movie features a pair of cousins.
Yes, so the boy, his dad owned the house, but before that his grandpa, so like the guy's grandpa and the girl's grandpa were the same person.
Oh, so you've done the family tree on this.
Well, because they were talking about the grandmas and, you know, their actual grandpa's first wife and his second wife and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, so they're not even distant cousins. These are like cousins.
Yes, they are. And the way some of the early scenes happened in this movie, it was like they hadn't been told what the relationship between them was. They hadn't read that part of the script yet. Because the only thing we got at that point was that he called her cuz twice. And I'm like, does he mean that? Or is that just a phrase?
That's weird, as he's watching her take a bath.
Yeah. And then she like kisses him on the mouth. Like, not then, but like just when they're like
In
hanging
front
out.
of her boyfriend.
Yeah.
Who makes the exact same face that we made at that point.
Yeah, because he read the whole script. They had only read that part.
No, but even later, like, there was some weird
Everybody.
relationship stuff going on
Yes.
between those cousins.
And with her boyfriend and the sorority girls, like, it was like no one quite knew who was with who, which I understand there's an element to that, but nobody acted like it was being weird.
Okay, but for the most part, I'm like, whatever, this is a movie about horny college kids, and they're all having sex with each other. Like,
Yeah.
whatever. Fine. It's like an episode of Grey's Anatomy. Except that these two were cousins,
Yes,
and they
were.
knew they were cousins.
And she was there with her boyfriend anyway. Just the whole thing
Yeah.
was weird. Like,
It was so upsetting.
it's so strange and
And
random
like
incest.
she was jealous of, like, anytime her cousin was
Yeah.
being attracted to the other sorority girls, like, she would get mad and send them out to do things and get them away from him. And I'm like, where is this going?
Yeah, why?
Yeah.
I don't know what the writers were thinking is the thing. Like, what was the concept there that made that make sense to them?
I don't know, except that maybe they just thought it was funny.
Probably. Because that's something earlier before we recorded this podcast, you said to me that you thought this movie was really funny. And I was like, oh, I didn't look at it that way. I just looked at it as terrible. And maybe that's the whole thing, is I'm missing all the intentional humor of it.
Because it was under terrible, terrible humor. Like,
Yeah.
really bad. I mean, really bad. I don't know. I mean, there wasn't anything. It's not like these two cousins, like, got it on. No. But there was a definite suggestion, which was very odd.
Yeah, and that's going to color the whole movie where you're like, what's happening here?
Yeah. Yeah, I think overall, it was not a good movie.
I agree with you.
But when you take away certain aspects of it, like if you just take some really strong bleach to it and just bleach out all the frat boy, sorority girl, trashy humor.
You end up with a 4-minute movie.
Okay, so they could have had it just be friends who were all friends and not the imbalance
totally
of
could
like
have.
this one girl is bossing everyone around in this super toxic way.
Mm-hmm.
It could have just been a bunch of friends and they're playing like they do in all of these movies. They've got like Truth or Dare or Spin the Bottle
Yeah,
or whatever.
definitely.
And they still could have had the scene where the girl ran through the woods naked for 5 minutes. But it could have been more like consent based, where she was doing it because they were playing a game and she like, haha, it's funny, I'm gonna do it, rather than I have to do it because I am the slave to this
That was the
older
word they
sorority
used,
sister.
yeah.
Like, that's gross. So you could have changed all of those things and had almost the same movie, but just with slightly different intent, and then it would have been hilarious. Like, really, there were parts of it that were really, really funny.
I mean, there were some parts I thought were funny, mainly involving the Phil sitting in the car.
Phil in the car, Danny's face.
Yeah.
Like, there were some really, really funny moments to it, and I liked that part of it. That being said, the story was all over the place, and, like, we haven't even really talked about the fact that it was a ghost story, but I don't fully understand what was going on with that ghost.
No. Well, and I can't spoil things, but part of it revolves around, like, protective things they had that were supposed to keep the ghost away, but they
Yes.
didn't seem to do anything.
Yes, this movie was very pro-cultural appropriation.
Oh, yeah, it was. Yeah.
When I say I enjoyed this movie, there was, like, a tiny fraction of it that I could see under all the garbage, where I was like, this could be really a funny movie. But in terms of rating this movie, I think that tiny little fraction of funny in there saves it enough that I'm going to give it 2 taxidermied bunnies out of 5.
Yeah.
Because without that sense of humor that it had, it would have been a 1, and if it had gone just a tiny bit further, it would have gotten a 0 from me, because it was
Because
problematic.
they're cousins.
Yes, but even less so, like, or less so that, and more like the problematic representation. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, for me, I won't go so low as to give it a 1. It was schlocky, dumb stuff that is worthy of 1.5 taxidermied bunnies out of 5. So, real top-tier material. Glad we saw it.
I mean, it was almost goofy humor, like we were watching High Anxiety again. Like, it was... It's not quite so parody-like, but it was almost parody.
I mean, there were some jokes, but I didn't see as many of them as you. I think a lot of the things that you're calling jokes are things where I'm like, that was very badly written, which is kind of funny, but they didn't do it right. And,
Yeah.
And your assumption is that that's intentional, and mine is that it's terrible.
Yeah, that is what my assumption is. I do think that a lot of that terribleness was them being like, haha, wouldn't it be funny if?
Yeah.
Only their idea of what's funny is not great.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Well, we are swiftly approaching our penultimate movie night.
I know.
What are we watching for our second to last podcast of the season?
Well, keep in mind, this would have been our last podcast, and that's important when you find out about the evil twin.
Yes.
Our second to last movie is called The Loved Ones from 2009. That's what MovieBot told us to watch.
Okay.
The evil twin of that movie, and the very cleverly chosen evil twin, thanks Mikey, is called The Last Ones from 2012.
That would have been perfect for our final movie.
It would have been.
But we do have 2 clever titles for our actual final movie now that we've had to rearrange. So
Sure.
we will be back here tomorrow to talk about The Loved Ones and The Last Ones. And until then,
Party on, Wayne.
and don't kiss your cousins.
Just don't.
Not on the mouth.
Yeah. I mean, not with that kind of intent. It was there. There was serious intent.
It was definitely there.
It's an uncomfortable movie.
I need to get more cats. There's this tree of 1,000 faces, and his brother's Johnny's back